Amina Rahman. To her neighbors in Virginia, she was the quiet woman in a hijab, polite and reserved, living a simple suburban life. But to federal investigators, she became known as one of the most elusive assassins in America, an ordinary face hiding an extraordinary darkness. This is the story of the Hitwoman in a hijab, a woman who lived two lives, took down powerful men, and vanished without a trace. She lived in a small, quiet neighborhood in Virginia, the kind of place where people waved at one another while mowing the lawn and exchanged cookies during the holidays. To those who passed her on the street, she was nothing more than a reserved woman in a black hijab, moving gracefully and silently through daily life. She was polite enough to offer a brief nod or a soft smile when neighbors greeted her, but never stayed long for conversations. Most people thought she was simply shy, someone adjusting to a culture far from where she was born. Children on the block occasionally whispered about how mysterious she seemed, but adults brushed it off. After all, she paid her rent on time, kept her yard neat, and caused no trouble. In America, there are millions of people like her, quietly existing, drawing no attention. Her modest house stood at the edge of a cul-de-sac, its curtains always drawn. She went about her routines with clockwork precision, grocery shopping every Thursday morning, taking out trash at night when the street was empty, and leaving for walks around the same time each evening. Those who noticed her patterns thought it was nothing more than discipline or habit. To them, she was invisible in the best sense of the word, someone who blended so well into the fabric of suburban life that nobody had reason to look closer. What nobody realized was that her silence was intentional. Every glance, every movement, every word she spoke was carefully measured. She built her life around being forgettable. Neighbors did not know her first name, and if they did, they couldn't pronounce it correctly. Most simply referred to her as the lady in the hijab. There were no dinner invitations, no close friendships, and no lingering conversations by the mailbox. She kept people at a distance, not out of rudeness, but because she had learned long ago that the less people knew, the safer she was. Inside her home, everything was meticulously arranged. The furniture was plain, the walls bare, and the rooms almost empty. To an untrained eye, it looked like a struggling immigrant's house, practical, modest, even boring. But tucked away in hidden compartments were tools that revealed a life far more dangerous. Small compartments in the floorboards held passports with different names, prepaid cell phones, and stacks of untraceable cash. A black duffel bag sat in her closet, never touched except when she left for assignments. It contained a set of clothes, gloves, and instruments she would never dare leave in plain sight. Yet none of this was visible to her neighbors. They only saw the quiet woman who attended Friday prayers at a small mosque downtown, who sometimes watered her garden, and who never hosted parties or gatherings. Her life looked so normal that even local police, who occasionally drove past, never gave her a second glance. But beneath this facade was a carefully guarded secret. She had perfected the art of invisibility, using her ordinary exterior as a mask for extraordinary darkness. Years later, people would ask themselves how they could have missed the signs. How could such a seemingly harmless woman be capable of carrying out cold, precise assassinations across the country? The truth was unsettling. She had never left traces, never created drama, never let her emotions slip in public. Her power lay in her ability to look like anyone else. She was the woman who could sit beside you at a bus stop, stand in line at a store, or walk past your house without ever raising suspicion. She was the embodiment of secrecy, hiding in plain sight, preparing for the day when her double life would come to light. The first sign that something far darker was unfolding came with the death of a powerful businessman in Washington, D.C. His body was discovered in his luxury penthouse on a cold winter morning. At first glance, detectives assumed it was a burglary that had gone wrong. The man's safe was open, a few valuables were missing, and there were faint traces of disturbance near the balcony. Yet the scene told a different story to those who studied it carefully. There was no broken glass, no forced entry, no struggle. The victim had been killed quickly and cleanly, with a single strike that suggested a professional hand. Robbers make mistakes. This was flawless. For weeks, the case stalled. Detectives dug into the businessman's finances, his rivals, and his personal life. There was no shortage of enemies. He had been known for ruthless deals, crushing competitors, and silencing partners who questioned him. But despite the long list of suspects, none of them fit the precise execution of the crime. With no fingerprints, no DNA, and no eyewitnesses, the investigation eventually lost momentum. Officially, it was left unsolved, one more mysterious death in the city's growing file of cold cases. Months later, hundreds of miles away, another high-profile figure was found dead under nearly identical circumstances. This time it was a Texas politician, discovered lifeless in his home with no sign of forced entry. The cause of death was the same: swift, precise, efficient. The crime scenes mirrored each other so perfectly that seasoned investigators felt a chill. Killers often leave a signature, and this one suggested not recklessness or passion, but professionalism. Someone out there knew exactly what they were doing. When a third victim appeared, a Chicago banker with deep ties to international money networks, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Once again, the house showed no break-in. Security cameras had been disabled at exactly the right moment. The victim was dead before anyone could react. By now, whispers had begun circulating inside federal agencies. Could this be the work of a contract killer operating across state lines? If so, it was someone unlike any assassin they had ever faced. Investigators began connecting the victims. Each one held power in a different sphere: finance, politics, industry. At first, their connections seemed vague, but with deeper digging, a hidden thread emerged. All of them had been involved, directly or indirectly, in deals tied to defense contracts and international funds. It was as if someone had chosen them with careful calculation, eliminating not random targets, but specific players in a dangerous game of influence. The public never saw these connections. Newspapers reported the deaths as isolated incidents: an unsolved robbery, a suspicious accident, a sudden unexplained loss. But behind closed doors, law enforcement knew something much bigger was at play. They had no suspect, no evidence, no clear lead, only the unsettling knowledge that someone was moving across the country, leaving behind a trail of powerful corpses and vanishing without a trace. The silence between each killing only made the mystery deeper. Months would pass, and then another high-profile figure would fall. Investigators began to feel they were chasing a ghost. Whoever the killer was, they left nothing behind except precision and fear. And while the victims' families grieved in private, those who studied the cases knew this was only the beginning of something far more chilling. The breakthrough came not through brilliant deduction, but by accident. In a dimly lit parking garage in New Jersey, a security camera caught something unusual. The footage was grainy, the image distorted, but investigators replayed it over and over again. Just minutes before the death of a defense contractor, a woman in a long black hijab appeared on the screen. She moved quickly, head lowered, slipping into a car parked near the stairwell. Her presence might have been dismissed as irrelevant, but the timing was too precise to ignore. This was the first tangible clue linking a potential suspect to the killings. At first, authorities resisted the idea. A woman did not fit the profile of the assassin they had been chasing. Every assumption leaned toward hardened men with military backgrounds, mercenaries, or shadowy groups tied to organized crime. The possibility that an ordinary-looking woman, dressed in a way that suggested modesty and religious devotion, could be behind these carefully orchestrated murders seemed unthinkable. Yet the image on the screen refused to be explained away. Investigators began re-examining old cases with new eyes. Witness statements that had been ignored before suddenly became valuable. A janitor in Texas had recalled seeing a quiet woman near the politician S. office before his death. A hotel clerk in Chicago remembered a guest who checked in under a female name but vanished before dawn. None of these accounts had been taken seriously, but now they formed a pattern. She had always been nearby, but never close enough to raise suspicion. Her disguise had worked perfectly. She was overlooked because she appeared unthreatening. The FBI began to circulate the blurry image among internal departments. Agents gave her a chilling title, the Hitwoman in a Hijab. Though not meant for the public, the name spread quickly among those working the case. It captured the unsettling contradiction at the heart of the mystery, a figure hiding in plain sight, using expectations and stereotypes to mask deadly skill. As analysts studied the killings, they noticed something even more unsettling. The crimes were not random bursts of violence, but part of a deliberate sequence. Each victim had influence in areas tied to money, power, and government contracts. Each death shifted control away from one faction and toward another. The assassin was not working for herself. She was eliminating specific targets for reasons no one yet understood. Agents began pulling phone records, financial statements, and travel documents. Each lead collapsed into dead ends. Whoever she was, she had erased her footprints with expert precision. Payments came in the form of cryptocurrency routed through untraceable channels. Hotel bookings were made under fake identities, then canceled without a trace. Air travel records showed nothing suspicious, suggesting she preferred ground routes to avoid attention. She was invisible, except for the brief haunting glimpse caught by that security camera. For investigators, the sense of unease grew. They were no longer dealing with a faceless unknown. They had a shadowy figure, a faint outline of someone who moved silently through American cities, striking powerful men down with surgical precision. The question that haunted them was not just who she was, but who was giving her orders. The pattern hinted at a mastermind, someone pulling strings from behind the scenes. Each new file landed on the desks of federal agents like pieces of a puzzle that refused to fit together. The one thing they knew for certain was that she was real, she was skilled, and she was still out there. The ghost they had been chasing had finally taken a shape, but it was one they had never expected. Her neighbors in Virginia could never have imagined the truth about the woman they thought they knew. While they believed she was a quiet immigrant adjusting to a new land, investigators eventually uncovered a story far more complex. She had not arrived in America as a blank slate. Long before she set foot on U.S. soil, she had been shaped by a history of violence and training that left her uniquely prepared for the role she would later assume. Her past had been carefully erased, but fragments revealed she had grown up in a conflict zone where survival required skills that ordinary people never learned. By the time she left, she carried not just scars but knowledge that could be turned into a weapon. In America, she built a life that looked modest and harmless. She rented a small house, attended religious gatherings, and worked part-time jobs that kept her under the radar. Everything about her existence was designed to avoid suspicion. She paid taxes, volunteered occasionally, and kept her circles small. On paper, she was the picture of an ordinary immigrant woman, surviving quietly in a country full of louder, more noticeable people. What nobody saw was the second life she maintained in secret, one that funded itself through violence. Her contracts were never arranged through visible contacts or direct meetings. They arrived through encrypted channels, buried in layers of code on the dark web. She used aliases that shifted constantly, and her payments came in cryptocurrency washed through countless wallets before ever reaching her. She was careful not to spend it on luxuries. Instead, she funneled most of the earnings into hidden accounts overseas, where they could not be tracked by U.S. authorities. Investigators later suspected that these funds were connected to a private network, one that may have included warlords, rogue intelligence officers, or underground financiers. She never left a trail long enough to identify them. Her methods were both chilling and ingenious. The hijab she wore daily became her greatest disguise. In public, it marked her as invisible. a figure people glanced at and then quickly forgot. In her line of work, invisibility was power. She could move through airports, malls, and busy city streets without anyone remembering her face. Disguises for assassins often meant wigs, false beards, or heavy makeup, but she used what society already handed her, the assumption that a quiet woman was incapable of violence. It was her shield, her camouflage, and her weapon all at once. When investigators pieced together her movements, they realized how disciplined she had been. Before every assignment, she lived in the target city for days or even weeks, blending in and observing routines. She would rent temporary rooms under different names, scout entrances and exits, and time her moves with clinical patience. Each killing looked effortless because it had been rehearsed countless times in her mind. She never left fingerprints, avoided cameras when possible, and destroyed any tools she used immediately after. It was a cycle of preparation, precision, and disappearance. What unsettled federal agents most was her motivation. The money was significant, but it was not her driving force. She did not live lavishly, did not collect expensive cars or jewelry, did not flaunt her wealth. Instead, the funds she earned moved overseas, fueling causes and networks still shrouded in secrecy. This suggested she was not merely a killer for hire, but part of something larger, a hidden machine of influence that reached beyond America's borders. Her double life became the core of her legend. By day, she was a silent woman in a suburban neighborhood, blending into the rhythm of ordinary life. By night, she was a ghost, executing missions with ruthless efficiency and leaving no trace behind. The contrast between these two worlds was so sharp that it baffled everyone who later studied her case. She was proof that the most dangerous figures are often the ones no one notices, those who build perfect masks while carrying the darkest of secrets beneath them. When investigators finally believed they had enough evidence to close in, they discovered she had vanished. The raid on her Virginia home was supposed to be the decisive moment, the end of a long pursuit. Yet what awaited them was an empty shell. The rooms were stripped of any trace of identity. Family photographs were gone, closets bare, drawers emptied. The refrigerator stood open and cleaned, as if she had prepared for the moment with meticulous care. Even the furniture was arranged to leave no sign of sudden departure. It was not the hurried escape of someone caught off guard. It was the calculated disappearance of someone who had anticipated every step of the chase. The agents searched for hidden clues, but she had destroyed everything that could connect her to the past. The secret compartments once holding passports and money were dismantled. Electronics were smashed. Their hard drives burned beyond recovery. Neighbors told officials they had seen her just days earlier, walking calmly to the corner store as if nothing unusual was about to happen. She had smiled, carried a small bag, and returned home. No one saw her leave again. It was as though she dissolved into thin air. Weeks stretched into months, and still no trace emerged. Then reports began to surface from across the Atlantic. A woman matching her description had been seen in Paris, boarding a train under a different name. Another sighting in Germany linked her to a hotel near a military conference. None of these claims were confirmed, but each one deepened the mystery. For investigators, it felt like chasing a shadow that multiplied with every attempt to corner it. She had become untouchable, her legend growing larger than her crimes. The case files grew thick with speculation. Some believed she had been captured by an intelligence agency and secretly recruited, her skills too valuable to waste behind prison bars. Others argued she had gone underground, continuing her work for higher-paying clients far from American soil. A darker theory suggested she had never been independent at all, that she had always been part of a network too powerful for authorities to confront directly. If that was true, then her disappearance was not an escape, but a relocation, orchestrated by those who had sent her in the first place. For the families of the victims, her absence meant justice would never be served. The deaths of powerful men remained unsolved, the assassin who had ended their lives free to move again. In private conversations, some investigators admitted a troubling fear that she might already be back in the United States, living under a new name, wearing a new disguise, preparing for another series of strikes. With her ability to vanish and reappear without leaving traces, no city could feel completely safe. Her story remains one of the most chilling mysteries in modern American crime. She had no public outburst, no reckless mistake, no moment of weakness that exposed her. Instead, she left behind silence, unanswered questions, and the haunting knowledge that she could be anywhere. To this day, the title given to her during the investigation lingers like a ghost. The Hitwoman in a Hijab is remembered not just as a killer, but as a phantom who slipped through the cracks of law and memory, leaving behind a legacy of fear.